Over the weekend, it was all quiet on the East Coastal area, eastern area of the United States for college football, specifically the ACC. But the Pac-12 is being pillaged. The Big 12, with a report this morning through Dennis Dodd, is where I first saw this come down. The Big 12 is in deep discussions to add 6 teams to their conference. The 6 teams include Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, Oregon, Utah, and Washington. So I immediately look at this and think, well, they're now taking what they can from the Pac-12. I immediately thought, Chad, of what we discussed last week of the rumors that were swirling about Oregon and Washington being a package and how the Big Ten was interested in that as well. And, in fact, I believe that the rumors were we would hear something early this week about Oregon and Washington and potentially the Big Ten to accompany USC, UCLA. We discussed the legislation that they were debating out on the Pac-12, specifically the state of Oregon, with Oregon and Oregon State. And I also thought of, where is Stanford and Cal in this? And if you're the Big Ten, are you going immediately after Stanford and Cal as the next pairing to add to your conference, if in fact Dennis Dodd is, and he's accurate, if in fact this comes to fruition where you see the Big 12 add these 6 schools, Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, Oregon, Utah, and Washington.
This is a lot different. I mean, obviously, the SEC comes out and it doesn't say we're courting so-and-so. Comes out and says, hey, Texas and Oklahoma are coming to us. And then Pac-12 in a slightly smaller but awfully big move says, hey, USC and UCLA are coming to our conference. Then you have this move. We would like very much for these 6 schools to come join us. We're going to court them hard. That's a much different tone and advancement, right? Two big conferences says, hey, we've got these 2 big boys and we've got these 2 big boys. And then another conference says, it sounds to me a mousy, like, we're going to try to get these 6 schools very hard.
So the Pac-12 this morning, the report came out that they have upped their timetable to renegotiate their television rights, which is horrendous, where Larry Scott completely screwed over the conference.
How's it going to get any better now?
With what happened. So they're trying to do that. And then right after that, the Dennis Dodd report comes out about they're getting gutted. So they're already in front of the Big 12 for the next TV rights deal. But now they're even further ahead of them. But what are they negotiating with if those teams are now leaving the conference? And here's the part of this I don't understand. And I've written a piece that will be on OutKick.com tomorrow about what I think the SEC and Big Ten should do. And this is not me agreeing with any of this. I hate most of this. But I also acknowledge that this is the direction it's going. You can't stop the future. And those in power want to stay in power. And the rich always want to get richer. These are universal truths in America and throughout the world. So they're going to keep doing this. Well, the 2 most powerful brands and conferences are the Big Ten and the SEC. They are set to make the most money and provide the most security for schools. So why on earth are you leaving for the Big 12 right now? I think that's, if I'm advising these schools, I think it's dumb. I understand the Pac-12 is not in a great spot right now. But I'm not just taking the Big 12's offer and going. If I'm in the ACC or the Pac-12, I'm not rushing to any other conference except the Big 10 or the SEC. If they come calling, I do everything in my power to go. I'm holding out and waiting to see what happens if it's the Big 12 courting me. Now, if you're Fresno State, Boise State, San Diego State, Appalachian State, name all these programs all across the country that aren't in any Power 5 conference right now, then yeah, you jump at the moment the Big 12 or the Pac-12 calls. But if I'm a school and the ACC, the Pac-12, or the Big 12 are trying to recruit me and I'm currently in a Power 5 situation, I'm not in a big hurry. Now, the first thing I thought of when I saw this preliminary report about the Big 12 wanting these schools was it's a leverage play. This is Washington and Oregon wanting to get into the Big Ten. Hey, we've got other suitors also. Big 12's making a move. this could also be in part with some of these programs a move to try to up themselves to the Big Ten or the SEC. So we'll see how it plays out. I just don't know why anyone would be in a huge rush to join the Big 12 right now.
And why?
I understand why you'd want to join the Big 10 or the SEC. I think you hold off a bit on the Big 12.
And why would a TV network be anxious to negotiate with the Pac-12 right now?
Well, I think a TV network would rather see a merger of the two conferences, which is what I think that's also in play here. The Big 12 leverages enough schools to be willing to bolt that you then go to the conference itself and say, hey, our contract's up, yours is too. Let's
become the third big conference.
Let's join forces and let's legitimately try to raise the price tag on our suitors. You're talking to so-and-so, we're talking to Fox, and you try to combine the negotiations, and you're off and rolling much more long-term than where they are right now. And if I'm Oregon, if I'm Washington, not only if it's a leverage play for the Big Ten, I'm also trying to ensure that when the Pac-12 is no more, I'm not with them. I'm not on the sinking ship. The Big 12 is as much a life raft for them as it is anything else when you consider where the Pac-12 is headed right now and how we were discussing where the Big 12 was headed 12 months ago.
What do we think's better for the sport? That scenario where you have a third player and you have 3 mega conferences, or keep going towards the 2 mega conferences?
I think what's best first off, on that report about the TV renegotiation for the Pac-12, you leaked that to try to keep your current schools from jumping.
Yeah.
Guys, hold off. I'm going to get a big deal done. George Kliavkoff is going in and saying, we're going to make this happen for you. Don't bolt just yet. So you're trying to kind of keep everyone on the ship. I think the best scenario for college football would be a straight merger between Big 12 and Pac-12, and then for Notre Dame to go ahead and go all in with the ACC, and probably West Virginia geographically to break off from the Big 12 and join the ACC, which would solidify that conference, and then you have a Big 4 at that point, and not worry about a Power 5, and you've got 4 major conference players that all contribute to an expanded playoff system, and you get to keep things a little bit more the way, we like them if you're a traditionalist with a sport, or you've been watching things for the last, in some cases 20 years, in some cases 100 years with a conference, and you want to keep those things the same. And then you have some sort of conglomerate Big 12, Pac-12 that's now the West Conference or whatever you want to call it, and it's this mega conference of all these schools, and they combine.
I didn't mean to leave the ACC out, but you're right in that it needs something to amp itself up a little bit. Notre Dame would sure.
Yeah, I mentioned that last week. Notre Dame with Josh Pate, I brought up the one play the ACC and Jim Phillips could make that would just have everyone shut up about any movement from their conference is to add the Irish. But otherwise, they're always going to be mentioned as schools that are going to be jumping ship rather than staying on board.
But unless they just give them the world, which is a much bigger percentage of the share of conference revenue,
they're going to lose out.
Notre Dame's not going to jump because they can hold out and get a good deal from the Big Ten or the SEC,
yeah, the
which
Big
can put
Ten,
them in a better spot.
It's rumored that the Big Ten could give them $80 million a year to join. And right now, so whenever USC and UCLA left, they went from it was a $12 million loss in annual revenue for projections for the Pac-12 per team per year, just by losing USC and UCLA. There are those within the sports business angle in front that say on the new TV contract, if you combine forces, teams could get around $50 million each per year on a renegotiated new television/streaming contract if they played this right. So there's money to be had versus money to be lost if you stay put and do nothing. The Pac-12 is trying to do something with the Big 12. We were mentioning last year at this time that the Pac-12 was on the clock and they should be calling up the Big 12. We just lost teams trying to do some type of merger. And because they've waited on these television contracts to expire, now the Big 10, who can negotiate with Amazon and Apple and others, and they've already they still have Fox on board. They still have other television contracts. CBS is in the mix as well. They can now add on an additional platform and make even more money to spread their wealth around. for their availability of games and teams and rivalries. They can put it on many different networks and platforms the way they've written out this new television deal.
I just got word my column's going to drop in 20 minutes, actually, with all this news of what SEC and Big Ten should do. To answer your question, Paul, about what's best for the sport, the issue with that is the Big Ten and the SEC don't care about what's best for the sport.
No, I know.
They are charged with looking after themselves. So in this, it's this amped up, supercharged world of if I don't do it, they will. Paranoia. That's now starting to take hold. Those conferences are going to look out for numero uno. So in doing so, they're going to create a system that's going to be profitable, sustainable, and it's going to end up being okay for every school that's in that boat in those two conferences. But I think it will slowly destroy those who don't get in. Now, what the Big 12 is attempting, if they pull this off, I think they're going to sustain. They're going to be fine adding those programs, and they're going to remain a player. They're not going to be Big 10. They're not going to be SEC level. But a straight merger between the two would keep them in contention for that. So that part of it's going to be interesting. I still don't. It's not just survival for the Big Ten and the SEC. They have raised their profile to a level that, they just got Oklahoma and Texas and then USC and UCLA. Those are two big prizes to bring in. So if Notre Dame jumps into either one of those conferences, that's the biggest one left out there. It's not just about survival now for those conferences. It's about let's run the sport. Let's run college sports. Let's be the ones that we're never going to have to worry about money. I think that's where they're headed.
It's not there are a lot of things I don't like about the structure of college football, but I think if you go all the way to the NFL, like we've talked about, AFC, NFC thing, you take away a lot of the things that are good about it and that make it different, and you might regret it after the fact. Not that they're targeting money first and foremost.
I think it's a huge mistake for the fan out there to mimic the NFL if you're college football.
Too much.
But here's
mimic it some.
But Greg Sankey and Kevin Warren, you would be a fool not to mimic the NFL from a money standpoint. The NFL is king when it comes to money and how they negotiate their television deals. So if you are a business person, you're looking at it saying, why would we not mimic the NFL and what they're doing? But that can run contrary to the fans of your sport that have helped build the sport. Now, I also look at this, and with my piece even, I'm looking at all the possible matchups within a conference if it moves to 24 teams in a mega conference, and I'm thinking there's a lot of really good college football to be played amongst these teams and new and exciting matchups we wouldn't normally see if these teams are now in the conference.
Also have to keep in mind,
but it's also, it runs contrary to the tradition of the sport.
Yeah, and it's not going to be as frequent because it's not a 17-game schedule. NFL, you don't see some matchups for 8 years, right? But it's still a 17-game schedule where you see a lot more. And in college, they're not going to come around quite as often. And I think we're going to miss them.
So the other thing to consider is they're already making a ton of money that we know off the contracts. The college football playoff is separate from the NCAA. The college football playoff contract expires with ESPN in 2025, but after that you don't need a unanimous vote to then expand the college football playoff. All of these television contracts are up then too. So if you think about why all of this is happening now and why the SEC, even though they're about to go into their ESPN deal, why the Big Ten is acquiring USC and UCLA, and why the Pac-12 and Big 12 need to move fast, and who knows what happens with the ACC, they're going to get the expansion that they want in the playoff system. And whether or not that's a part of the NCAA or not, meaning all of the conferences, there will be a have and the have-nots on crowning the national champion as we view it, right? Second,
what kind of vote do you need?
Well, right now you've got to have all the presidents and ADs on board with moving forward to expand the commissioners rather, with moving forward to expand the playoff. And that's why we've seen all the bickering back and forth between guys like Greg Sankey and Jim Phillips and and others, and de facto commissioners who are, in or out. And Kevin Warren, too, is also looking at things and scoping things out, trying to figure out what's the SEC and ESPN trying to figure out long term that we're either going to be a part of or not be a part of, and how do we get our share, right? How does Notre Dame factor into that in 2025? There would be, to me, some leverage in making sure that they're attached some way. There would be some monetary gain for the college football playoff moving forward. And in this question, I'm posing the idea that there's no longer a Power Five, and we're not funneling conference champions per se to the playoff itself based on a system that we have in place. I'm looking at it from a separate angle where you have 2, 3, 4 power conferences, and then you have the rest of college football. And it would be the 2, 3, 4 power conferences that are going to funnel teams through their own semifinals to the college football playoff. That's how I would structure it. And is Notre Dame a part of that or not? If they are, someone's going to benefit from it other than just Notre Dame. Someone being a conference.
Yeah.
That's a huge – and also consider the NCAA runs March Madness. They're a $1 billion company and barely even get money from the college football playoff compared to March Madness. In this scenario, you've got Sankey and Warren and whoever else wants to join saying we're going to start our own and we're going to make the March a profit and television numbers, if not equal, we're going to take a big chunk out of it, and we're going to have our own national championship based on the schools we have competing.
The basketball thing will hurt. The change will hurt a little bit because the Cinderella element's a big deal in March Madness. The Cinderella element's nothing in the college football playoff, and that's where I think you can ultimately pressure Notre Dame a little bit because as your conferences grow, your schedules are going to grow, and where's Notre Dame going to find its games eventually?
Yeah, Notre Dame's going to be a part of it based on the eyeballs they bring to the product. I don't think there's a scenario where the SEC, the Big Ten, and anyone else involved would not want Notre Dame on their schedule and involved in their postseason.
Absolutely.
But the question is, which conference is it benefiting the most, and how do they go about structuring that? That's another fascinating angle that I'm sure the Big Ten, first and foremost, is trying to figure out.
I wonder if, it's probably unwise to discount the SEC in that.
Yeah.
Right? They're the biggest and the baddest.
Or the ACC. Like, they're by getting Notre Dame, you also get NBC. You get Peacock. Like, you get all of this access that they have through their own private television agreement. And they're in no rush. As Josh Pate pointed out, it's not like they have a deadline like some of these other conferences. Coming up, we hit some more headlines. We've got John McClain in less than 15 minutes on OutKick 360. John McClain coming up. NFL headlines in 8 minutes. OutKick 360 rolls on from 6th and Peabody with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Always love when John is on. Plenty to chat about across the NFL as we're, 3 weeks away from really diving into training camp?
26.
I really think that once you get to the 4th of July, the official countdown to football season starts.
Yeah.
Because you're just a few weeks, 2-3 weeks away from training camp, and then
Media days for SEC is happening in 2 weeks.
Yep.
Yeah, we're here. We're here. Yesterday, Joey Chestnut doesn't reset his own record, his world record for hot dogs in 10 minutes. It was previously set last year by him. I think 76 is the record. Yesterday, he ate 64, I think, 63 or 64.
He had 63.
But he choked out a guy, too.
Yeah. And, why do you go that far if you're just crushing everyone? If 63 wins the title, why do you go to, what would you say the year before, 97 or whatever it was?
No,
70-something?
76. He's trying to set the world record again.
His own world record.
Yes.
Amazing.
You were once a competitor in this field.
Yeah, not to his level. I've also never had to take down a protester during any competition.
Man, and he had you could tell Joey Chestnut has choked out a man before. I mean, he took this guy down fast.
It's also on crutches. What's up?
I don't know what happened to his leg.
There's a darkness in Joey Chestnut that we saw come out yesterday, and I'm here for it. You're right. I mean, I saw a guy this guy's either worked as a bouncer before,
something,
or he's thrown hands before. I mean, you don't grab someone with that level of force and take them down. And there was a look in his eye like he was having PTSD from something. And I thought he was about to pull a knife out of his sock.
He did a double take, and he's like, "Oh,
guy.
this guy's protesting something," and then puts him in a chokehold, and that guy just dropped
immediately.
Yes, and then went right back to scarfing down hot dogs. The way that they announce these other guys, number 2 in the world or whatever. I was watching the highlights on ESPN last night. They're announcing number 2 in the world, and his feats are amazing. Like he's won head to head against Chestnut 3 or 4 times, maybe more than that throughout his career, eating different things, not hot dogs. But he goes up there and has no chance against Joey Chestnut. Who is the main focus. The introduction for him is even on a grander stage than anyone else. And it's all free pub for the hot dog company.
Nathan's Hot Dogs, yeah.
Yeah, their goal is to see how much free media they can get out of that event every year, and it wins.
And we just gave him some.
Well, yeah, but I didn't mention the brand, but everyone knows who it's associated with, and now they have not only the hot dogs, but the protester dropping in a chokehold that'll be replayed for free as well. John McClain next. Second hour is here of OutKick 360, 6th and Peabody, our location, with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. We broadcast live in Music City, Nashville, Tennessee, every day. You can join us here on location with great moonshine and beer on tap made here on site. Fantastic firework display here downtown last night. I don't know how they measure this, if it's based on length or money spent or the number of fireworks. But if it's not number one in the country, it was number two yesterday here downtown. Watching it, they had it on the TV, and it was spectacular. So they had 350,000 estimated last year, and Broadway was again slammed with all of the fireworks being displayed across the river. Luckily this time, gentlemen, none of the security or police officers or firefighters were stuck in the pedestrian bridge building, the bridge building, while all the fireworks went off.
Was that last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's maybe it's by like dynamite tonnage they measure it for the biggest
I don't know.
fireworks show. So I have no clue.
But it looked great. And then I'm friends with a guy who happened to be landing at B&A around 9:30.
Time to fly.
Whenever you could look down and see the nation's largest firework display. I saw a few videos, honestly, from Houston, and that's where John McClain joins us. He joins us each and every week at this time. We talk NFL headlines with John McClain, Sports Radio 610, and a Pro Football Hall of Famer. His name's in the Hall of Fame, both in Canton and for the state of Texas. John, hope you're doing well.
I am, guys. I was on Interstate 10 last night with my wife, Carol, watching fireworks over downtown Houston. The neatest, most spectacular fireworks show I've ever seen was before the last Super Bowl in San Diego. Houston was the next year, so they had their host committee there. The host committee rented a huge boat and took a lot of people out into the harbor in San Diego, and they had their fireworks display on the harbor coming off of different boats over downtown San Diego, and it just went on and on. The fact that you were on the ocean made it even more spectacular. The next best I've seen was in Washington, D.C., as they celebrate the nation's independence. It was spectacular as well. And you guys don't need much of a party to get people to come downtown by the hundred thousands just to celebrate something.
That's
They
fair.
probably celebrate Paul's birthday if you let him know.
Oh,
They'll
wouldn't
be-
be celebrating.
They'll
that.
be celebrating something today. I mean, every day there's a party on Broadway. John, you're right. You can follow John on Twitter at McClain_on_NFL. I don't know what type of report this is. If you're going to put out a report on Baker Mayfield and name Seattle and Carolina and then mention a mystery team, but not mention the team who is a mystery. I don't know exactly what type of time or effort to put into this, John, but I am asking myself who that team might be if it's not Carolina or Seattle for Baker.
Well, first of all, we don't even know if it's true. And I've said all along, I don't understand why Seattle would not be interested in Mayfield, considering they have Geno Smith, number one, Drew Lock, number two, which means they don't really have a starter. And Mayfield is healthy. He's in the last year of his contract, so he's playing next season for millions and millions of dollars. Plus, he's got a huge chip on his shoulder to prove the Browns wrong and tell them where to stick it. And his best chance of success would be with the Seahawks. They have two great wide receivers. They have a great receiving tight end. They've got two good running backs, and they use first and third round picks on offensive tackles. They use the offseason to help fortify their offense. And then they got Geno Smith as the number one quarterback. That's like having a Mercedes offense with a Volkswagen engine, unless Pete Carroll knows things we don't know. And he professes publicly to have confidence in Geno Smith as the starter, and maybe he will. Maybe at his age, all of a sudden the light's gone off and Geno's going to do a tremendous job of replacing Russell Wilson. But the odds are against that. I would want Baker Mayfield. Carolina's been the team all along. They say he's interested. If I'm Cleveland, I'm swapping him for Sam Darnold and playing Darnold over Jacoby Brissett. And as far as a mystery team, you didn't say who wrote that or tweeted it, but sometimes if you say mystery team, you don't know who it is. Somebody's told you in an organization, well, there's a mystery team, but I'm not at liberty to divulge to you, even off the record, who it is. But it will be a surprise because so far there haven't been many indications that other teams are interested since before the draft.
Yeah, it's from Michael Balco, and I got that through Red Zone that put out the story and rewrote it. Mystery team enters Baker Mayfield trade talks. John, you mentioned Geno Smith as the starter in Seattle. I find it interesting about how split members of the Seahawks are on who the starter is. For instance, you've got the U.S. Open taking a shot at Drew Lock. Drew Lock fires back. DK Metcalf is taking Drew Lock and backing his quarterback. And I'm thinking, well, if it's Drew Lock, then it's not Geno Smith, who started like a month's worth of games last year whenever Russell Wilson was out with that finger issue.
Yeah, that thing was some intern with the U.S. Open who saw that tweet and then responded with Drew Lock. Fast is, it shows you how uninformed that intern was. Drew Lock's not the starter. They're not prepared to go 17 games with Lock. They're prepared to go 17 games with Geno Smith, according to Pete Carroll. So that was funny. Lock's response was funny. It was weird to see Drew Lock and U.S. Open in the same sentence, and it was humorous for a day. And now, fact is, I don't even know if anybody pointed out, he's not even the starter.
John, did you cross paths with Hank Goldberg at all during his time? He's a big shot in Miami, obviously, during his career, or connected to ESPN?
I knew the Hammer a little bit when he was in Miami and he was a talk show host and he was the number one guy there. Dan Le Batard is now, Hank Goldberg was before him. And then Hank got into gambling and odds making and did a great job with ESPN. What I always liked about Hank Goldberg when I'd see him on ESPN, most of the time, TV's for the longest time, like pretty boys. Guys with great hair, guys who were thin or they looked good in suits. Hank Goldberg did not. They put him on there for what came out of his mouth not because of the way his hair was. And so I had great respect for him. He'd been ill for quite a while. And then, of course, he died. His longtime home when he left Miami was Las Vegas. And even though people knew it was coming, it's still very sad because he made an impact, big time impact in South Florida, and a pretty good impact when you wanted odds on the NFL. And then he kind of faded into oblivion.
John, one of your Baylor Bears, Robert Griffin III, is wanting to get back in the NFL. I was surprised he's only been out 1 year. It felt like it was another year or two that he's been away from the game, but took 1 year off, has been doing television. How realistic do you think it is that he can get another shot to be a backup quarterback for someone?
Yeah, like I remember when he took that job with ESPN, remember Fox was after him as well. He ended up choosing ESPN. They gave him a lot to do in his first year. He did games, he did studio, and he's very, very well spoken, but he also is informative and he's not afraid to give his opinion. And people like that. But from the moment his name was linked to ESPN and Fox, he made it clear, and he had it in his contract, that if the team offered him a job and he liked the job, he would take it. Now he's putting it out there again that he's staying in shape and he wants to play. Now I'm partial to him, of course, since he was Baylor's only Heisman Trophy winner. And basically the reason they built McClain Stadium on the banks of the Brazos River. But his last job was backing up Lamar Jackson. And supposedly he did a good job helping Jackson's transition into the NFL and helped with his success behind the scenes. But the fact is, nobody's reaching out to him. I don't think he costs much money. He just wants an opportunity to get back in an organization. And I can't imagine, with all the bad quarterbacking going on in the NFL, that a team would not at least be interested in signing him, bringing him in and seeing what he could do. Also, if I'm Robert Griffin III, next year, if I still want to play, I'm looking at the USFL or the new XFL, and I'm going to one of those. And I don't know if he thinks that's beneath him or what, but if you're looking for an opportunity and you want something new on tape, that may be the route to go.
You know, an example for you, John, would be in Chicago. You mentioned the backups. Right now in Chicago, the backups for Justin Fields are Nathan Peterman and Trevor Siemian. Those are your quarterbacks.
That's rough.
I mean, that's and it's not like RG3 is looking for a starting role.
Both those guys, well, Siemian had a little success. Peterman is not. And so if I'm a team like that, I'm looking. One thing I'm interested about RG3, and we'll never know, were things put out about him in Washington that he was hard to handle, that he was a prima donna when he was with Washington. There was nothing said like that when he was with Baltimore. John Harbaugh had nothing but praise for him. So did Lamar Jackson. And if he wants another shot, I hope he gets it. Chicago might be a place, but if he's telling people he's available and they haven't reached out by now, maybe they won't. Maybe his best bet would be if somebody gets hurt before or during training camp. Nobody, I don't think, would sign him during the season if a guy was hurt in a backup role, because there'd be too many other backups who've been playing in preseason. So he can't afford to be particular if he wants to return to the NFL.
Well, and he's got he is writing a book with Gary Myers.
Not anymore.
But not anymore, right? He put that, He's writing it. He's not publishing this until I believe his career is officially over. Yeah. Is that how I read this?
That was smart of him, because doing a book, and in the initial release, it took some shots at the Redskins, hinting that he'd been sexually harassed. Well, of course, that got a lot of attention. Well, that's bad timing. You want to come back to the NFL, you don't be putting anything out there like that. Gary Myers, longtime NFL writer for the New York Daily News, before that, the Dallas Morning News. And Gary has written quite a few books since he retired from the newspaper business. And he had that deal going with RG3. And I thought, wow, I can't wait to read about that, because there'll be a lot in there about Baylor, not just his NFL career. And then I saw where I thought they had just shelved it all together. But if he's going to wait till he's sure that he's not going to be playing anymore, he could still be doing the book and have it ready to go for when he did decide his career was officially over.
John, people keep listing Odell Beckham as the great carrot still available, I guess, in free agency. Maybe not realizing how late that ACL tear was. He's not going to be available till October, November. Then he's a guy coming off of an ACL still who's going to need some recovery time. What kind of value do you think he is for anybody that's not the Rams? And do you think there's a chance he gets signed before the season by anybody other than the Rams?
I think the only one that would do it might be the Rams, but remember, they got Allen Robinson. They basically got him to take your place. They got Van Jefferson, Cooper Kupp. They're loaded at wide receiver. And Odell Beckham Jr. now has a Super Bowl ring. His tenure in Cleveland was not impressive on or off the field, but because he's a big name, people still put a lot of stock in his ability. I think that somebody signs him, they would look for him to be a contributor more in the second half of the season and maybe the playoffs. And that might be smart for a team like the Rams. I would think he'd be worth more to the Rams because they know about the surgery, the injury. They've had him last. They can afford to sign him and let him continue his rehab if it took half the season. And it might or might not. Maybe he's able to play earlier. But as far as a team going out and signing him to be the first or second season, I just don't see it, especially not for an impressive amount of money.
Just for context, last 3 years, he averaged 3.8 catches, 51 yards, and a third of a touchdown a game. So, it's not as dynamic. And those numbers were actually lesser with the Rams, where he was surrounded, obviously, by a good cast. But a lot of Titans fans are coming to me like he's the number one guy. He's not going to be a number one guy coming off the ACL. And he was a locker room issue in Cleveland for sure, who got better after he was out of
not in L.A.
Yeah,
not in
L.A.
He helped them win a Super Bowl.
Yeah,
he didn't finish the game, but he helped them win that championship.
Oh, absolutely. He was a good piece.
Here's what I think about that. I just heard or read or both about Packer fans being excited about Julio Jones might sign with the Packers. And I'm sure you guys
have fun.
Wouldn't get real excited about that one.
Yeah,
well, there or Indy is the other one that's been floated out there. You feel like Indy would have happened by now, though, right?
Also, Indy on the turf, I can't imagine is a good match.
Also, any receiver, even if they're over the hill and not productive, is going to be infinitely more exciting playing with Aaron Rodgers than Ryan Tannehill.
Yes.
So if I'm a Packers fan, I could work myself up to getting excited about Julio Jones because the guy who's throwing him the ball.
Also, are you excited about potentially half a season of Julio Jones?
Well, that's where your excitement dampens. Is the availability issue.
Coming up, we will discuss the receiver who is not there, Devontae Adams, what Brett Favre had to say about Adams in Vegas with his new quarterback, not Aaron Rodgers. We'll get into that. We will discuss Deshaun Watson and the legalities that we await from the NFL on exactly what's going to happen with his suspension or not, and we'll get John's take on there from Houston. We will also dive into Von Miller, who is no longer with the Rams. He is now a pass rusher in Buffalo and what he might bring, not just for the regular season, but postseason aspirations. And we will go back down to Houston with John and discuss what Lovie Smith is up against as the new head coach of the Houston Texans. All of that and more coming up with John McClain on OutKick 360. OutKick 360 rolls on across the OutKick network, joined by John McClain. Each and every Tuesday at this time, we talk NFL headlines with John. You can join us on social media by following OutKick 360. You can also follow John there at McClain_on_NFL. John, it was a sobering reminder that it's not just in the trenches exclusive. When the reports were released early this morning about Demaryius Thomas and how they found traces of CTE in his autopsy that came back. And, you know, when you think of his career, a short career, including the wide receiver position, if I'm playing the game, no matter, you know, at what age, this is another sobering reminder of what could happen.
I believe the doctor said what killed him is not associated with CTE, even though it showed up. Can you imagine what will happen if they ever develop a test that a player can take at any time to see if he has an onset of CTE? Right now, the only time it can be diagnosed is when you're dead. And if they ever come up with it, would players, if they found out early in their careers, you are a candidate, if you continue to play, to have CTE, which can have debilitating effect on you through the rest of your life and could contribute to your death.
Well, and I wonder, John, how much of the CTE issue brain trauma, everything else plays into what we're entering into the NFL now, where players are taking complete control of negotiations even before negotiations normally happen, with some holdouts that we're seeing where you see guys, and this isn't, completely new, but trying to get as much as possible as early as possible because careers aren't going to last as long, because guys have more knowledge now about what's happening to their brain the longer they play football.
And that's true, but also careers are lasting longer because there's more money to be made, and because players take better care of themselves, and because they have great doctors, great rehab, diet, things they didn't used to know. It blows me away when I consider everything that is available to a player today compared to the way it was when I first started covering the NFL. And the Oilers had like one bench press at their locker room on their practice facility, which was a dump and is now a parking lot. And they had a few weights to lift on the side. Most of those guys looked like basketball players. They were strong, but they weren't ripped the way they are now. Plus, so many of them smoked. And I know a lot of guys today that are in their 70s, and they've had no problems with any kind of brain trauma, even though they banged heads for a 10 to 15 year career. So you never know for sure. The fact of the matter is there's so much more technology and so much more information available to you. And every player I know that I've ever asked, if you had to do it over again, would you do it? Even though they've had hip replacements, knee replacements, every kind of replacement you could have. And every one of them I've talked to said absolutely. They have one regret, that they weren't born later so they could be making millions and millions of years instead of 100,000s.
John, did you, as a member of the seniors committee for the Hall of Fame, have a recent cut down vote? We did on the coaches and contributors side. I'm wondering, I imagine you have plenty of qualified candidates there. What did you cut down from to 25? On our side, it was 37 to 25. If I could have voted for fewer than 25, I would have. There are not 25 qualified coaches and contributors, I don't think, on the list.
I'll just say this about coaches. I hope Buddy Parker wins it. He won 2 championships with the Lions. When's the last time anybody mentioned Lions and championship
I'm
in
with
the
you.
same sentence?
He's one of my top 2.
Good. He deserves to be in. Yes, we're putting in, I think, 3 this year, seniors. There's so many that I don't know anything about. And I served on that committee, the Centennial Committee, with people like Ron Wolf and John Madden, Gil Brandt, Bill Belichick, lots of former general managers who are in their 70s. A couple of them are in their 80s. And they hadn't even seen some of the players who were on our ballots from back in the 20s and the 30s. So we're having to go on basic information. But there are a lot of guys who played after World War II. Maxie Bond, linebacker from the Rams, 10 Pro Bowls back when the Pro Bowl meant something. Eddie Metter, 10 interceptions, one of the top interception machine. And those, a lot of people haven't heard about them. And so we did have that cut to 25. I spent a lot of time on it, Paul. And when I got to the 25, I was happy with it. And now it's going to be a lot more difficult to cut from there down to the list of finalists.
John McClain with us. John, Brett Favre says he expects a drop-off in production for Davante Adams paired with Derek Carr compared to the relationship that he had or had for his entire NFL career with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. And he said, hey, that's not to say he's not a great player, because he's a tremendous player. We'll see that with Las Vegas. But it's hard to shift gears, especially from a player as prolific as Aaron Rodgers. I'd be shocked if he had the same year he's had this year. That coming from Brett Favre when asked about Adams now with Vegas. Are we going to judge him solely based off that?
Well, we shouldn't. You know, how are we going to judge him? He can produce and be great, but he's got some talent. Hunter Renfrow at receiver, Darren Waller at tight end, looking for a new contract. Derek Carr is coming off his best season, and they're good buddies going back to Fresno State, but he's not going to force the ball to Adams when he's got other terrific receivers. And Davante Adams, it was almost like Adams or bust for Aaron Rodgers. I think if the Raiders could, they're not going to go 14-2 or 13-3, or I can't remember what they were last year in a 17-game season, but they've only been to one Super Bowl under Aaron Rodgers. And I saw a stat where in the last 8 games they played without Devontae Adams, they were 7-1 and averaged 31 or 32 points a game. So no matter how much Carr wants to get him the ball, he's got better receivers than Rodgers did. But still, there's only one Aaron Rodgers, and I'd be really surprised if he had the kind of stats with the Raiders that he had with the Packers, even though he's playing home games indoors.
Yeah, they were 10-7 a year ago, finished second in the West. And you're right about all the production. That's what I thought of. And then I think, okay, who does Green Bay have left? Robert Tonyan's back. They've re-signed him at tight end. They have Randall Cobb, who they acquired in the trade last preseason. Alan Lazard is back under that 1-year restricted free agent tender, I believe. Sammy Watkins has been signed, but I know they drafted Christian Watson Christian Watson in the second round of the draft. But this is not a wide receiver core that you could put up there with probably any wide receiver group that Aaron Rodgers has played with throughout his career, top to bottom.
And that's
pretty obvious. Yeah, pretty obvious. Aaron Rodgers is going to have to do some serious whipping up chicken salad out of what.
And how does that go?
I think it'll go better than people expect because Rodgers is one of the better all-time passers in NFL history.
One addition this offseason that was talked about for maybe 24 to 48 hours, and it's kind of been pushed to the regular season discussion whenever the guy starts to have production, is Von Miller. He's a veteran. He's, 32, 33 years old now. He signs a 6-year deal in Buffalo coming off the season in L.A., and unlike the vets at the trade deadline that you expect to provide a big splash with the news, but then maybe they fizzle out or maybe they're just not nearly at the level that they once were. Von Miller's the opposite with his production. There's his production from the trade deadline to the end of the season, which of course ended in the Super Bowl for him, was spectacular. He finished with 14 tackles, 4 sacks, 6 quarterback hits, and a forced fumble in the postseason. And he had 50 tackles, 9.5 sacks, and 17 quarterback hits in the regular season. Of course, part of that is with Denver. But now inserting him into that Buffalo defense, John, and as consistent as he has been throughout his career, what are expectations like for that Bills defense?
I'll tell you what, he had Aaron Donald with him. He had good player Bradley Chubb with him in Denver. And Von Miller missed a season because of injuries. He's suspended one time. And so it's not like he's been getting a lot of wear and tear lately, but he knows how to turn it on near the end of the season when it counts. That 6-year contract's paper mache. He's hoping to get 2 or 3 years out of that. Most people have the Bills representing the AFC in the Super Bowl, and that'd be great for him. He's a dynamic leader. One of the things he does, organize pass rushing camp every offseason. I think that's been a boon to a lot of young pass rushers. And he's a really good guy. And he can still play. He's a good teammate. I think for an aspiring Super Bowl team like Denver, a lot of people looked at that deal. What in the world are they thinking? Well, they're thinking this year. They're thinking, we want to go to the Super Bowl this year. We think Von Miller can help us. And if they get him beyond 1 year or maybe 2, they would be incredibly happy.
They've done a lot at pass rush there. Obviously, A.J. Epinesa, Boogie Basham, Greg Rousseau, in addition to Miller over the last 2 years. The other deficiency on that team has been the run game. Offensive line, Roger Saffold, we know, a great run blocker, not a great pass protector. Mitch Morse, the new center, and James Cook, a new running back in the mix there. What do you think of their run game progression, John?
Well, first of all, Paul, so much of their run game is Josh Allen. I saw a picture of him. My God, is that guy ripped? He looks like a tight end. He's 6'5", about 240, 245, and he runs well. He runs like Cam Newton. And so I think they hold their breath every time he takes off. But unless they get better production from a guy like Cook, who's also an excellent receiver, maybe the best two-way back coming in the draft this year, I think it still revolves around Allen. But man, it's scary when he runs and he looks for contact. You don't see him run out of bounds much. You don't see him slide much. He likes to punish people, and that warrior mentality is great, but he's got to do a better job of taking care of himself. And it would behoove the Bills if they found some running backs to run and they could limit what Josh Allen does on the ground, maybe when plays break down. But he's a tremendous asset. They're trying to win the Super Bowl. You know they're going to utilize him, and you hope, if you're Bills fans, that running game is going to be better, and they're going to be better not because of Josh Allen.
John, what is Lovie Smith up against as the new head coach of the Houston Texans?
Well, he takes over a team that won 4 games last year, had the 3rd pick. They used their first 2 picks on defensive backs. They were terrible in the secondary last year. They signed 2 former Buffalo defensive ends, 34-year-old Mario Addison and 33-year-old Jerry Hughes, who combined for 13.5 sacks last season to compete at defensive end for a defensive line that is a 4-man front, provides most of the pressure, and the sack leader had 8. So they need those guys, and Lovey's still going to call the defense, and they still got a lot of deficiencies. Most people think they have the worst roster in the league, and they very well might. Where last year they were older because they signed a lot of veteran free agents to 1- and 2-year deals because they didn't have number 1 picks 2 years in a row, didn't have a number 2 pick last year, but now this year they had a bunch of picks, including 2 number 1s, so they should get younger.
Younger, but is Lovie Smith, do you view him the same way you viewed David Culley a year ago, or is this more of a play where Lovie Smith won 10 games in Chicago? He's certainly been interviewed for head coaching jobs prior to this one, unlike David Culley. Do you see this with a better chance of working out long term?
Well, I do, because he's got a better roster. He's got a quarterback, Davis Mills, played really well over the last 5 games. They believe in him going into his 2nd year. He's got to have a better running game. Couldn't be any worse. Worse in the NFL, worse in franchise history. It was just pathetic with a capital P. Got some receivers with experience. Defense could be a little better. Special teams are fine. But Lovie Smith's last 8 years in Chicago, he was 24 games over 500, went to Super Bowl, coach of the year, got fired after a 10-6 season, and goes to Tampa. They have the worst record in the league and draft Jameis Winston. They play him, improve by 4 games. Then he gets fired because they're afraid Dirk Cutter, the offensive coordinator, was going to leave for a head coaching job. And so Lovie Smith, I think, made a mistake going to the University of Illinois. That was a dead end. He should have either sat out a year or become a defensive coordinator. And if it was with a good team, he'd have a 3rd chance. This is the first time an African-American head coach has had 3 jobs. And he said he had unfinished business. They respect him a lot. But the fact is, they don't have very good talent. So if they could win 5 or 6 games, people here ought to be satisfied, and then start looking to 2023 when they have another 11 picks, 2 number 1s, and could have 120 million in cap room, and be able to sign some good free agents for a change.
John, we had David Culley in studio last week. He said something about Davis Mills that got a lot of Texans fans worked up and excited. He said if he came out a year later, he's probably the first quarterback taken in the NFL draft, given the crop of quarterbacks this past year. Some would say that just doesn't say much for these quarterbacks in this draft class. Others would say that's a big compliment for Davis Mills. What did you think about his comment?
Well, Mills started only 11 games at Stanford, and the reason he came out instead of going back was because his coach, David Shaw, couldn't tell him that because of the pandemic, things were not going to be any different last season as far as preparation, time spent, number of games. So he just decided to enter the NFL. And David Culley saw his progression, saw him behind the scenes, saw he played in the last 5 games. I would have said the same thing, because it says more about the crop of quarterbacks that came out this year with only one, Kenny Pickett, going in the first 2 rounds.
John McClain with us. He joins us each and every Tuesday at this time. John, thank you as always. Have a great week. And, before we know it, training camps will be upon us. We'll be previewing the divisions coming up with you.
What's this like for you, anticipating a training camp where you're not necessarily going to be out there standing in the furnace?
I like the off-season program. I'll be out there every day. I'm on the radio here 5 times a week on the flagship, and I'm going to be doing some writing for the station's website. I've actually had 3 job opportunities. I don't know if I want to write. The reason I retired from the Chronicle is I just got tired of writing so much every day. I like talking about sports better than writing, because you guys, when you write for your website, or Paul, when you do it all the time, it's a whole lot easier talking about it than writing about it. Thank you very much for having me. Hope you guys have a great rest of the week.
Thank you, John.
John McClain never stops.
That's right.
Never stops.
Never stops.
Sports Radio
never stopping.
610 there in Houston is where you can find him. And on Twitter at McClain_on_NFL. We love having John McClain on with us weekly. Coming up.
Those Houston camps are a different
level of humidity and heat, you're saying?
Yeah, well, you were covering them whenever they had 2-a-days too, right?
I don't know about 2-a-days, but they
2-a-days
also.
I mean, that wasn't that long ago.
Yeah,
it was a CBA and a half ago.
It's a brutal heat there. Different element. Really tests you.
John's been in the fire for 50 years. He's ready for another one. Sign him up.
He's wearing all black out there too.
Sometimes all navy that looks like all black.
No sunny light colors for John McClain. Only all black out at camp.
Stallions win the inaugural USFL championship. We discussed the season and what is expected for season number 2. That's next on OutKick 360. OutKick 360 rolls on. Congrats to the USFL and all of the people behind the scenes that made it work for a full season, capped off by the Birmingham Stallions championship game this past weekend, this past Sunday night. 33-30 was the final. It was 20-9, the halftime score. Birmingham up, and Philadelphia made a charge back and forth second half, where they score a touchdown. Then quickly, there's an interception that allows Birmingham to get back up. Scooby Wright had the INT that more or less put it away.
Pick six.
And after that score, Philly was able to get back on the board, but not enough. And Birmingham wins the title after losing just one game throughout the entire 12 weeks of football that they had, because they went to Canton. A great crowd on hand, and overall very successful season based on where they were in April and where they hope to be next spring, which will be year number 2 of the league. That much we know.
There's a lot of roster cleanup in the NFL right before camps start. And I think that's the main curiosity from here is how many guys get into camps right at the beginning. Better yet, for once there were injuries and stuff start happening. So are you going to kick some guys out of your roster to bring some of these guys in right out of the gate? And I'm curious what those numbers are, guys.
I think there's 4 to 5 players who can latch onto a camp somewhere. How many of those make an active roster, I'm not sure. But I look at the USFL and the players I saw. I think there are somewhere between 3 to 5 players who could realistically be in a camp a month from now.
Well,
based on speed and based on position.
Couple observations watching that game. Exciting finish with 2 backup quarterbacks in the game. KJ Costello, the former Mississippi State Bulldog, came in for Philadelphia late, and he threw the pick 6 to Scooby Wright. Bounced back nicely with a touchdown drive and made it interesting in the end. It was fun to watch the 4th and 12 be implemented for the onside kick instead of an onside kick. Didn't work, but it was fun watching that the build up to that play happening, where Philly really had a chance to win a championship if they complete a 4th and 12. The crowd was good in Canton for the championship game. I think it was a successful first season. Fox announces after there's going to be more hub cities, host sites, not just Birmingham next season. And it's going to go head-to-head with XFL. So I think what this season showed was you can be successful and you can sustain this thing past the season. You got through a full season. It was announced, you knew early in the first season there was going to be a second season. Now we're going to really test the appetite because there's going to be a completely new league launching next spring during the football offseason.
Though the XFL,
this is going to get very interesting now.
I don't know how much overlap. I don't know how long the XFL season is, but XFL starts right away after NFL's over. Saturday, February 18th next year.
Yeah, but I'm saying you're going to have 2,
what's
major
the appetite for a lot?
off-season leagues for pro football.
Well, the good news for the USFL,
they got a 1-year head start.
They have a 1-year head start. Every player who signed on this year has a 2-year agreement with the league. They put that in there knowing that the XFL is coming a year later. So the XFL can't just go and poach and sign players off of USFL rosters to start in February.
It's going to have third-tier players.
But the group of players, and I think this can end up helping the USFL, the players are looking at unionizing. If that happens, that, to me, will help the USFL even further their foothold on spring leagues compared to the XFL, which is, again, going for that flat rate versus an actual collective bargaining agreement that these players are looking for with the USFL. It's not going to break the bank the same way the NFL would, but at the same time, it could benefit the players who are having a spectacular year, not having to make the same amount of money as the guy who, comes into the league and is not performing at the same level as a Victor Bolden, for instance, or a Jamar Smith, who's throwing a 70-yard touchdown pass in the championship game. Those guys should be making more per week than the special teams guys or the backup quarterback. And right now, based on the way the league was structured, for the most part, every player is making exactly the same amount of money.
Yeah, that's going to need a change. There's also a change in the college football realignment story. This coming down just now from CBS Sports. Colorado has issued a statement. Dennis Dodd's report was that Colorado would be one of the 6 teams that's being approached by the Big 12 to leave the Pac-12. So Colorado, the university, released a statement saying CU Boulder supports the decision of the Pac-12 Board of Directors this morning to begin conference media rights negotiations. We are committed to the Pac-12 conference and look forward to being an active participant in those conversations. So what I said earlier, getting out in front of this, we're going to bump up those negotiations even sooner in hopes to keep our members in this conference. It's worked with at least one of them based on that report, because Colorado says they're staying, and they're going to be in the Pac-12 negotiations with a new media rights deal.
I think we see somewhat of a merger between the Big 12 and the Pac-12, and the media rights deal will share all.
I think that would be the right when it broke. I said that's going to be the smartest route for those 2 conferences to survive, and not only survive, thrive. I mean, if you get both those conferences together, and especially if you cherry pick the best from both conferences, you got a legitimate, not just football but sports league where you're going to make a lot of money in television.
Yeah, I just don't. I mean, I would think the networks they're talking to are going to be part of brokering that. The Pac-12 seems to be making it sound like they're negotiating like as is, or there's some implication to that, which seems silly. Like,
doesn't this just feel like posturing on all sides?
Yeah.
Well, the
Big
Pac-12
12
is
getting reports out there that they're going to go after these teams. They're going to add these 6 teams, and this comes minutes, maybe an hour after the Pac-12 leaks a report that they are bumping up their media negotiation. Now you got Colorado on the same day coming back saying, we approve of what the Board of Governors said, and we are committed to the Pac-12. So now the Big 12 going to come back and leak another report to show how they have the bigger hand in all of this. I mean, this all could be leading to them shaking hands at the end of it and saying, let's figure something out together.
Yeah, through multiple media partnerships and outlets.
yeah.
Yes.
And where the media is the one that's really going to be doing the determining.
Well, that's no shock.
Yeah.
Look at ESPN and the SEC in Texas and Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And how upset the Big 12 got. And why we don't see an expansion in the college football playoff right now. Because the conferences don't trust the networks.
They don't trust ESPN specifically.
Right. So this is no shock. And for the Pac-12 last week to say that they were surprised, how can you say that? How can you say you're surprised that USC and UCLA left?
Well, if you're surprised, I would argue you're not really doing your job, or you're trying to act like we're shocked that they would be so disloyal.
Yeah, you think
to
the
the
history
Pac-12
is going to carry things instead of the money.
Yeah, I mean, you're not just. I mean, you're beyond resuscitation at that point if you're surprised by it. If truly they're surprised by it,
You should have been scared.
I
of
don't
it.
think the new commissioner is surprised by it, based on his business model and having the background of MGM. Like that, to me, that was just a cliche response to what you're actually trying to load up and do, which is to keep the media partners on board. And how do you do that? You've got to think bigger and much more long term, and with that comes the Big 12. We'll dive back into this coming up. Plus headlines including Major League Baseball and tipping pitches. Third hour, OutKick 360 is here from Nashville, 6th and Peabody with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Glad you're with us. Talking NFL, college football, Major League Baseball headlines from the July 4th weekend. We hope all of you had a safe and happy 4th of July. I was surprised, guys. The fireworks did not last deep into the overnight like I thought they might last night. Not that it bothers me, but I know it bothers a lot of people throughout the neighborhood. I didn't hear very many of them after like 11 o'clock.
I got home at like 10-something maybe on both Saturday night and Sunday night from Sounds game, NSC game, and there was nothing lingering, which was pleasing to me because, as I've said, I've got a dog that's in a panic state. So it was over by the time we got home both nights. And last night, like you said, that in my neighborhood also did not linger long. People maybe coming to their senses or their budget takes them only so far.
Or the weekend allowed them to fire them off.
I don't know about you guys, but my allergies are at an all-time high on 4th of July night and the next day. And I think this year is a combination of I mowed my yard and weed-eated the morning of the 4th, and then I was in the grass. I'm allergic to grass, and I'm in the grass all day. And then it doesn't hit until that night where I had a sneezing fit. I woke up, had 3 sneezing fits, and I still feel like I've got hay fever right now. But also, there's something with the air quality and the smoke that I'm inhaling with fireworks with little kids. And driving through my neighborhood last night, it wasn't the noise that was a problem. I heard a few fireworks go off after 10 p.m. No big deal.
Yeah.
They're far enough away. But, I mean, I'm driving through my neighborhood in a fog of smoke. Like when you get into neighborhoods that shoot off a lot of fireworks, there is a thick layer of smoke that you're in the entire time. That bothers me.
Well, I think the utter lack of rain in Middle Tennessee for so long has messed up our atmosphere in ways that we can't tell. But I mean, how long has it been since we've had like a day of rain? Like I had an hour of rain.
We had an all-day deluge.
We did not get enough. We got a little bit on that day, but it was not an all-day thing. Paul, Slappy on Twitter is echoing your complaint, saying, I've got an early primary complaint. For the first time since 1915, the Yankees did not play on the 4th of July. So not only was that rare, it's the first time since 1915 that we talked about it.
I mean, I think like nobody was paying attention and thought about that. Like, oh, they've played every 4th of July since 1915? We should probably schedule him for the 4th of July.
It's very, very weird. And it's really unfortunate that it's a year where the Yankees are the best team in baseball so far this season.
The Angels are far from that. And
Always.
Perfect segue.
Phil Nevin, their interim manager, admitted that his pitcher was attempting to tip pitches on purpose, as crazy as this sounds.
It's a cat and mouse game.
Well, I don't know if it's like if he's trying to protect his pitcher from being an idiot. So Mike Trout can be seen on the Apple Plus broadcast, like mimicking the pitcher almost in like disgust of like the glove, mimicking the glove of his pitcher, Peguero, and saying like he's frustrated by saying like, if I'm seeing this, everybody knows what pitch is coming. Well, Phil Nevin was like, well, in fact, we were doing that on purpose. And he says that all of the identifiable movements were intentional as part of his effort to try and make it look like he was tipping his pitches and fool the batter. The problem with this is his pitcher gave up 4 runs in 2/3 of an inning.
Didn't get out
Just
of an
imagine if they weren't doing this, Hutton, they would have given up
4
8 runs.
So, like, can you like imagine being in the clubhouse, either pregame, postgame, or whatever, and actually trying to have your pitcher go through the mechanics of trying to tip your pitch without tipping your pitch. Like, I want you to look as though that a fastball's coming, but actually you're going to throw a slider here. And then your pitcher goes out and gives up 4 runs in 2/3 of an inning.
But see, that claim requires a follow-up question. If you're claiming that you're intentionally doing it, then I'm thinking in my mind, okay, I buy that if there's a book on you and you're trying to do the opposite. So now my glove position shows slider, where before people are getting tipped that it's a slider, now it's fastball. So I've switched them. So I'm being very intentional about putting my hands in a certain spot and letting you believe it's something that it's not because the book is out on me. Now, if that's the claim and you want to follow up and ask the question, okay, Phil, so he's doing the opposite of what he was doing before? Because I'm looking at the video and the side-by-side, this is a slider, this is a fastball. So did you flip the two? And now suddenly he just had a bad day locating his pitches, and that's why he gave up 4 in 2/3 inning? But you were actually doing the opposite of what he normally does? It doesn't hold water unless there's a follow-up question where you can explain that. Because what we're seeing is, and I've looked at the side-by-side photo, this is a slider, this is a fastball, this is the pitcher getting crushed over the course of 1 inning. Here is your star outfielder in the outfield mocking your own pitcher because he's showing the batters exactly what's going to happen.
The Angels went on a good run after they fired Madden. It didn't last. They are 7 games under 500. They're 16 behind the Astros in the AL West. They're 6.5 off the wild card with 1 billion teams ahead of them. It's just never going to work for the Angels. They have Trout. They have Ohtani, who's the best story in the history of baseball, who gets no traction and should be the biggest attraction in the game. It's ridiculous that they cannot be better. Every time one of the two of them does something great, they lose the game. It's a disaster. And Phil Nevin, quite frankly, was a disastrous guy in New York. He's a good friend of Aaron Boone, and he did so badly as the third base coach, they fired him. He's now, shockingly, a manager because somebody else took him on and then got fired. Yankees are running the bases great this season. He was in charge of a lot of that last year. They were terrible at it. They are a mess, and they got to do something next year to try to salvage things. It's unbelievable that team, which is not that bad talent-wise and has 2 of the very best people in the game, can be this consistently bad. And if those 2 don't make a playoff appearance soon, I mean, you have wasted generational talents.
It's an organization that I always feel like they're just completely missing one facet that makes you a successful team. You know, there'll be years where it's, man, they've got some really good young starting pitching and no hitting. And now you got a situation where their staff is horrific. And they have no pitching, and they're a good offensive team with some good offensive talent. They can't ever balance it. Whatever it is that makes an organization tick, whether it be talent scouting, managing.
General management.
Yeah, exactly. managing your contracts, and they can't get the right balance of what a team should be.
They're missing such a window here. It's a crime against baseball. And you're talking about marketability. I mean,
well, the baseball, it goes much beyond just the Angels not being good.
No, I know, but
crux
there's
of my
two
point of the
marketable
column.
guys who are largely not marketable because their team consistently lets them down. Also, being on the West Coast doesn't help you. But
the Cardinals over the weekend, I believe it was Saturday, hit 4 consecutive home runs, back to back to back to back. Only 11th time in Major League Baseball history has that happened. And they did it with 2 outs.
That's amazing.
And end up winning by 1 run in that game. But they had Goldschmidt, who I believe remains the odds-on favorite for NL MVP right now. No one would guess his name. He gets on base through a walk, I believe, and then Arenado hits a 2-run shot, and then 3 consecutive home runs followed that. Not every day you see that, and once in a blue moon.
Well, there were 2 other things that happened yesterday that have never happened before. The Twins, I'm doing a Fox News rundown on this. I can't believe how often in baseball something happens that's never happened before. You would think the window of things that are available to happen that have never happened before has just shrunk down that it's not possible. 2 things happened Monday that have never happened before. The Twins turned an 8-5 triple play. So the center fielder caught a ball that wasn't that hard, but it had a projected 820 batting average on it. And the guys on first and second took off. He threw it into the third baseman. Third baseman tagged one guy, stepped on second where the guy didn't tag up. Triple play. Had never happened in the history of baseball
Third baseman
before.
stepped on second? So
because they were shifted. Yeah.
A lefty was up?
Yeah.
Okay.
So 8-5 triple play. Never happened in the history of baseball before. Same day, Brewers beat the Cubs. First career home run for one guy. Inside the park home run for another guy. Walk-off home run for a third guy. Never had those 3 home runs happened in the same game before in the history of baseball. 2 things on the same day. Never had happened. It's probably the same day that the 11th time in the history of baseball you got
This
4
was
home runs.
Saturday, yeah.
Okay. So in a weekend, you had those 3 things happen. It's unbelievable to me how often that can happen in baseball.
It is nuts.
The Phillies kept in their same pitcher for all 4 home runs in that game.
Well,
I think
once
after 3,
the
I'd
first
be
one's up,
requesting to be pulled
well,
from the
they're
game.
only 1-run home runs after that. It's not that punishing.
Guys, we're good. We're staying in here. That's only 4 runs.
Serve it up.
Come on.
Keep serving it up.
I got those first 2 outs, no problem. And then I had a little hiccup with 4 straight home runs, but I've got this thing now. At least I'm not tipping
Did he
my
get
pitches.
out of the inning?
Yeah, I mean, the inning ended after the 4th homer. I mean, they already had 2 outs, so they're just like, surely we're not going to have 5 straight.
Can this guy please get us to the 5th? That's all we're asking.
Hit us up on Twitter at OutKick360. Chad, we previewed this earlier in the show, but let everyone know about your column that has now posted, that was going to post yesterday, or tomorrow rather, but ended up posting earlier today.
I got to check and see now if it's actually posted. I was told it was going to post at 3 o'clock, but I've not seen it. So I'll double
I saw
check
it on the
that.
screen with the QR code, so I'm assuming it's available.
Yes. Okay. It is up now. So we talking my college football
Yes.
or my
the one that was going to post tomorrow.
Gotcha. The story comes out today about the Big 12 wanting to go after Pac-12 schools. I wrote for OutKick about what the SEC and Big 10 should do under the mindset of global domination. Not what's best for the sport. This is not what I'm saying I want to happen. This is what I am saying will happen eventually. And if the SEC and Big 10 just want to go ahead and claim dominance and superiority over the sport, they would do this thing. And it involves adding 8 teams immediately or as quick as possible to both conferences.
You can find that at OutKick.com. Also there from our July 4th columns, Withrow's Guide to Theme Park Happiness. We'll dive into that throughout this hour. And when we come back, baseball's marketability and just comparing the July 4th weekend for me to how I now view it as the casual baseball viewer. Not a diehard fan by any means anymore, but I will flip on a game casually without the appointment viewing aspect of it. And the biggest difference is what's happening in between innings nowadays or on the commercial breaks for the fall, the summer, the spring. It doesn't matter. It's hard to find Major League Baseball players pushing products. And before you immediately think, well, there was only one or two guys in years past, we don't view these guys and brands the exact same way. And there are prime examples of it from the late 90s. That's next on OutKick 360. I don't know about you, but if you grew up in the 90s, or a previous decade for that matter, July 4th probably hit different for you than it did yesterday or this past weekend. Maybe not. OutKick 360 rolls on, but definitely for me. Look, July 4th, I grew up about an hour and a half from Nashville. And July 4th, we were starting the countdown to like a big neighborhood picnic that takes place at the end of July. And then right around the edge of that weekend was college football really gearing up. So it was still about football. But there was a relationship between us and the television if there was baseball on. It was just known. It wasn't planned. But if baseball was on, we were watching MLB, especially this time of year. We were almost there for like the All-Star weekend, gearing up, and a home run derby. But we would actively be able to mimic players' batting stances. Aside from like and I pointed this out in the column at OutKick, guys, batting stances were one thing. And everybody, you can name anyone from Ken Griffey Jr. to Mo Vaughn. And if you drafted that roster on your team, where 2 or 3 per team would get up and try to mimic this stuff, you knew without needing to see anything how those guys' stances would be in the batter's box. Mimic them outside of the batter's box. All of it. And outside of the actual batting stances, we knew their nicknames. Give me Aaron Judge, and we say all rise, almost a tongue-in-cheek. Is there a great baseball player with a good nickname right now? I mean, Mike Trout is the closest thing to Ken Griffey Jr. that we've seen in regards to marketability. Ken Griffey Jr. had the first player-exclusive cleat brand with the Swingman brand, and Trout landed his own cleat exclusively through Nike in 2014. But, I mean, is he recognizable from the sense of you know him by another name other than Mike Trout? That to me is distinctly the difference in this baseball era, where I can turn on the TV and see Jimmy Garoppolo pushing product on a national campaign. The Browns don't want Baker Mayfield, but there's a national agency that wants him as the spokesman for their product. And I don't see any Major League Baseball player anywhere. It's not just Ohtani and Trout, and they've got Judge, and you can start naming all these players. Tell me where the clients are lining up with Major League Baseball in order to market these guys off the diamond. It's not happening. And there's a big line of distinction between this era and that era just from that alone.
Vlad the Impaler is a pretty good nickname for Guerrero, but I don't know if it's widely known. I think it's a terrific nickname.
That's great, yeah.
I think you're totally on. I was never into stances, but I know a lot of people that were in swings.
Oh, but I guess the biggest thing, Paul, on that is it's not like being into stances. You give me a silhouette of a guy's batting stance, and I could tell you who that was. Everybody is very cookie cutter for the most part. Like if you got kids in the neighborhood together for a home run derby playing wiffle ball, they're not going to hold a draft where you're going to have an NL, AL, and all these all-stars, and they're not going to have any distinctive characteristics about who they're playing with.
Well, it's not I'm not defending it. I think it's sad the way it's gone. But I think it's less and less of a national game, too. And the way we talk about it with regard to, I don't want to say giving it a break, we're just smart enough, unlike a lot of people who think like baseball's dead, to acknowledge what it is, and it's a regional sport where if you're in New York, particularly this year if you're in New York, Yankees and Mets are doing very well for New York. But the Yankees and the Mets don't have a national following, and people in St. Louis aren't going to watch the Yankees and the Mets if they're on Sunday Night Baseball. And I think you've lost the thing where outside of maybe Aaron Judge and a couple guys that a kid who's really into baseball might know, and they might buy an Aaron Judge jersey, maybe, if you're a big baseball guy. Outside of the biggest couple of guys, Ohtani, Trout, Judge, you don't have a national personality. You've got a local personality. So Aaron Judge has a lot of advertising in New York, and I imagine Mike Trout does in Southern California, but it's not national branding hardly. It's local branding. Which brings them a lot of money, marketing money on top of their
Well,
contracts, but not on national.
Well,
see,
I Googled this. So, Chad, you can look up endorsement deals. A lot of the player endorsements today are through Rawlings, who is owned by Major League Baseball.
Yeah.
So I just set that aside. If they're listing Rawlings as endorsement deals, it
That
counts
doesn't
for
count.
their bottom line.
But it doesn't.
But Major League Baseball runs the company now. So I'm looking outside of that. And, I mean, there's not a gaming console. There's not a tire brand. I mean, if you just look up Griffey's endorsements, Nomar Garcia Parr, like it just lists all these different brands throughout their career that they were associated with. And it's very difficult to find anything more than one or two players that have multiple national brands.
Yeah, it's just changed.
But Jimmy G.
Yeah, I saw that the other
It's on
day
Subway.
on a Subway commercial where they have Tom Brady and Venus Williams
it's
and
his mom in
huge
the ad.
people.
It's about him being good looking.
And
it's
Italian.
not. It's not really the same. I don't know. It's
But it's still
Oh,
she's
but
in
it's-
there, but it's not. Yeah, it's a different spin on it. Great column, by the way, Hutton, with this, because it got me thinking about my childhood and 4th of July. And I had a cousin who always visited from out of town. Him and my other cousin, his brother, and we'd play a game where he would name a player, and my grandmother had an exact replica of Hank Aaron's bat he hit 755 with in her living room, and we'd pick it
Massive
up
bat, right?
in the living room. Huge, yes. And I remember being a kid, and he'd say Jim Thome, and I could get into the Jim Thome stance. Ron Gant,
Yes.
Terry Pendleton.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not talking about guys with national,
Right.
ad dollars coming their way, but baseball players, Robin Yount, and I
Javi
get in the
Lopez.
stance. All these guys back in the day, and
Yeah.
I knew all of them, and they were huge St. Louis
Chuck
Cardinals
Knobloch.
fans. But just because they were Cardinals fans didn't mean they couldn't get into the stance of Julio Franco or whoever we would name, Kent Herbeck. I mean, we knew all of these guys then.
Craig
And,
Counsell.
I mean, here's an easy one. If I said Hideo Nomo right now, how many adults could immediately do the Hideo
Yes.
Nomo delivery and go all the way back? And
Yes,
kick
and
the
I
leg
left
up big
I
and do
left
that.
pitchers out of the whole column because I could go
Well,
down a whole
here's-
different rabbit hole with that too.
Here's where I'm gonna. And Paul, you're right in what you're saying. It's more of a regional sport now, but we'd let Major League Baseball off the hook way too much because the real question is, well, why?
Yeah, it's up to them.
I mean, there were regional telecasts back then too. I wasn't watching a ton of national baseball games back in the early '90s, late '80s, mid '90s. But
And
I knew
it's
all
not
these
like
guys.
ESPN lost their interest in the sport. I mean, ESPN can bury you just by not
Well,
acknowledging
it has.
you.
It doesn't have baseball tonight
Baseball
anymore.
tonight was a big part of my childhood,
Me
and
too.
the sounds
Yeah, but
of that.
they still have Sunday Night Baseball. You can tune in to the network and get your highlights.
But it's also not. It's not ESPN's. It's not on ESPN to make it a national sport. Major League Baseball needs to do a better job. The individual teams need to do a better job through Major League Baseball, through their broadcast partners, and get active in getting with national brands to promote these guys, to get some ad dollars coming in, to get them in national commercials. I think too often we just fall back on, well, it's just the way things are now. And I understand that with the changing of times, things are going to naturally change. But I watch Major League Baseball today, and I'm not watching a dying product. I think there are very good players out there.
yes.
The level of play has never been better in many, many ways. The one problem we get into a lot is, pace of play.
Well, strikeouts. There's
With
too
it.
many strikeouts.
But that's because pitchers are awesome.
Well, I
Like
agree
if you
with
are
that.
a fan of good pitching, you're in your heyday right
Well,
now.
Major
with
League
what pitchers
I
Baseball-
agree
can
with
do.
that, but baseball also likes home run. Just the
But I
three
mean,
three
there's-
outcomes.
There's plenty of home runs.
I also
in
don't
baseball,
think
too.
Major League Baseball likes individuality.
It doesn't. It's homogenized product.
And that's
That's a problem.
That is
There are
where
no
they've
Ricky
really
Hendersons.
lost.
There are no
Yeah, I mean,
huge personality.
but just think about, so not only did you know these guys by their names, you knew them by their nickname. I mean, everyone from the Big Hurt, the Kid, Crime Dog, Iron Man, Rafi, Big Mac, Mr. Padre, Juan Gonzalez in Texas. I mean, they're again, like the recognizable aspect of the league right now is hurting, and it's not. To me, it's not just the individual player's responsibility. I lean to what Chad's saying. I mean, Major League Baseball, they were not into Trevor Bauer even prior to his 2-year suspension. They hated the guy because of his vlog, where he would take the camera behind the scenes and take you on road trips in the hotel, into the clubhouse, and take you on the day-to-day aspects of it. And if he got a letter in his locker where he's getting fined, he opened it up and showed you on camera his reaction to it.
Yeah, they should have embraced
Major League
that.
Baseball hated that. And there's a big disconnect with that now, because I think the social media era of this, they need more of it. And more, I see them embracing now. Altuve was doing on Sunday Night Baseball, it was last weekend or the week prior, he was doing a live interview in the middle of the game, much like an all-star game. It's like third or fourth inning.
They've been doing more of those, which is good.
And that's cool. But we need more of that and less of the very broad scope that they paint this league with nowadays.
It's pretty
for whatever
vanilla.
reason. But why
I mean,
do they do
Aaron Judge and Mike Trout are both tremendous ball players who do everything right, and they're both very vanilla. And I think consciously so. That's just what they are. And you're right. I mean, I think it suppresses stars if you're an outspoken, flashy guy. I don't know that you're
But it's
you're
also
as welcomed or
weird
as embraced.
because I watch, I don't watch a lot of it, but if you turn on a TV and watch a college baseball game, those guys are doing whatever the heck they want out there and going crazy. Kids baseball, Paul, you follow it. I mean, I'm sure there's some outspoken players and they've got some flair.
Guerrero seems to have some flair.
But where does he play?
Well,
I
mean, they're going to be
this
spread
is
out.
America's pastime. I don't remember getting behind a lot of Blue Jays or Expos back in the day.
Oh, but where you played didn't matter. I still knew Dante Bichette with the Rockies. He was out there playing in Denver. I mean,
but
Griff was in Toronto.
Every team was represented in an all-star draft that we would have.
Right, but I'm saying personally, maybe you guys are different. I didn't root for Canadian teams or players. No, that's just the hard stance I have.
Yeah, but
like he's saying, there was one on every team.
Okay, but let's
put
put the blame where it belongs. It's on baseball to figure this out and get it right. And is the issue that they have that we're going to alienate our older fans if we allow individuality in the sport, that they're going to be so turned off by it and we're not going to draw enough new fans to have it be a problem? Because I'll go back to this.
Maybe some.
When I was in love with baseball in the early 90s, I knew every player that was playing. I knew the nicknames. I knew the stances. I knew the pitching deliveries, everything else. And I don't recall my dad's generation being turned off by that or by the game, with whatever was happening then. So let's take a chance on something different.
In fact, the ratings went up during the steroid era.
And I still love it the same way I did, especially when my team's good. My team's good now. I like nothing more than going home and having that game on. It's just on. I'm not necessarily married to it. I think it's the best sport that way. You can plug in and out of a baseball game without being, football's the edge of your seat. You got to be there for the whole thing. Baseball, because there's no clock. That's one thing I think it fails to do also is embrace its differences. I've said that since we've been together as a show. It's different, and that's good. There's no clock. How great is that? They figured out a game that doesn't have to be timed. I mean, that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
That's a good thing, not a bad thing. Now, you've let it slow down too much to a crawl, and you got to get better. And you're too accepting of strikeouts, and there's too many foul balls and all of that stuff. I think they let too much stuff go for too long, and they don't know how to reel it back in. It's almost like a bureaucracy.
I think it's too easy to just go with the defeated, well, it's just changed, and this is the way things are now, and it's the way it always has to be. I think that there are guys that are playing today that could have more of a national recognition to
I think
their
so,
name.
too. And I think there's ways to change it. Theo Epstein's in the league office now. He's a guy that changed some things in the wrong direction, maybe. Who knows how to undo them? Get to work. Where is your work product?
So I just did a quick Google search of Yao Ming in the NBA. His endorsement deals: Apple, Visa, Garmin, McDonald's. Where is Ohtani's national brand? International brand? It doesn't matter who he plays for. Think about that. If you're pitching and you're hitting home runs, it should not matter who you're playing for and whether or not that team wins at a high rate. The Angels do not.
And it's unheard of what he's doing.
But point being, where are the companies that would have lined up a decade ago for this, 15 years ago from this. That in the same way that you play into the Yao Ming aspect of it, where you have another player, maybe you team up with Trout and you're going through the different apps that you can get through your Apple phone, and what's popular for Ohtani is different for Trout, and you play up the aspects of what's different about them. Like it would play well in a 30-second to 60-second commercial, but they'd rather, those same brands, those same sponsors would rather have Jimmy Garoppolo buying a Subway sandwich or, going to Baker Mayfield to push insurance at a random, insert team here for 2022.
I think there's a little bit. I don't know how widespread this is. I can't imagine Vlad Guerrero, and I know it's not an American team, Chad, passing up on stuff. But I do have the feeling like if I'm recollecting Trout right, he just doesn't want it. He just wants to focus on baseball, and he's not interested in doing the other stuff. And I don't know how you change that if you've got some guys that are like that who just don't – they're making enough – in baseball that they don't want it for the money, and they don't have a personality that wants to do it. And baseball somehow has loaded up on some of those guys. And it's a weird thing. It is.
Well, and then eventually
it hurts the sport.
No one wants to sponsor them. Bryce Harper was the name that came to mind because he's got a national Gatorade ad that I see often during baseball games. But I can't think of many other guys who are on a national advertising campaign. And Bryce Harper right now is not the first name that comes to mind when I think about Major League Baseball superstars.
Some of these pitchers should be too,
star.
like longtime guys. Like where's Kershaw been, or Verlander,
Max
or Scherzer.
But there's an era where, like, where was the line drawn with this? From where we went through, you had a handful of pitchers. Like, there was a distinct style and brand to Randy Johnson, Pedro Martinez. We could
even Greg Maddox, the kind of geeky thing.
We could draft Mike Mussina and mimic Mike Mussina on the mound, but you can't do that nowadays, and it's not just like a 2020 issue, like this decade. I'm saying this has been going on for quite some time, and I'm not sure where they decided, we're going to jump off this moving train and be more about MLB than we are the name on the back of the jersey, and to me that's odd. Especially and
it's hurt them.
The NFL tried to do the opposite. The NFL tried to come up with a way that you distinctly knew these guys, even though they're wearing a helmet and a face mask to cover their face. Yeah.
Here's what, and I don't want to answer the question on the line of demarcation between when this was a national big sport brand in baseball and when it's not, because oftentimes that lines up with the end of our own adolescence. But I feel like it's right around the time of 9/11. I feel like post-championship with the Diamondbacks into the aughts and past is when you saw a decline in terms of national branding for players and teams even in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, but even those eras
I'm not saying it's because
of
9/11.
Still Piazza,
I'm just saying right
Jeter,
around then.
And Clemens throwing that bat at Piazza
Bonds
around then.
Yeah, Bonds was happening after that. Like I don't know if it's because of the home run saga and all that. Maybe that's part of it too. I don't know.
Well, the Bonds, steroid. I don't know. Again, like as you grow older, you think differently and care differently about sports. So I'm in college at that time, and that's when I stopped caring as much as I did as a kid. So maybe it's different, for everyone when it happened. But the bottom line is it's happened. So how do you address it as a sport?
And
if
is
you're
it too
Major
far
League Baseball?
gone? Is it too far gone? I don't know how much they recognize it and see it as a problem. Is the other thing.
Well, here's
the
where
leadership is an issue.
Here's where the problem is going to be recognized, and it's going to be just like the NBA with older fans when they watch The Last Dance. When people tune in and watch The Captain, which I think they're going to, they are going to reminisce about that time. And then they're going to look at today's game and the game today, and it's not going to be the same to them. Not to the level of 90s NBA compared to today, but there's going to be some people that get very nostalgic about this documentary and watching this.
So the column that I had in mind was more about how we could mimic not the top crust, the upper crust of the league, but I'm going a shelf or two below. Like, how is Pete Alonso not a household name in Major League Baseball right now? The guy loves the home run derby, shows up and produces at that event, that in and of itself is a marketable
He's a
aspect
Met.
for
That's a
Pete
problem.
Alonso. There's no problem with that. Zero problem with him being a New York Met. And from a marketability aspect, he's got the outgoing personality that I would want to attach myself with. But the big brands don't even want to be associated with the top individuals. I wrote this down. Aaron Judge. He's going to be. There would be a line of teams if he's a completely unrestricted free agent next offseason. Outside of the Yankees, they'll be lined up wanting Aaron Judge on their team. I want to believe that after this season, there will be a line of advertisers that would want that same thing. Immediate history tells me that's not going to happen. But the 1997 version of me says, please let that happen, because Major League Baseball needs more of that and that type of exposure. So when they're not, I'm not the casual. I'm not the appointment viewer for their product. I'm the casual viewer that's flipping by, and for the sake of that, they should want more individualism within their marketability of their players.
I'm not making excuses for it. I think one thing with Judge is this is only the second healthy season he's had. He's not through it yet. But I think if you're considering Aaron Judge over the last several years, you say, well, the damn guy, if you sign him up, he's going to disappear right in the heart of baseball season, which is what he's done every year since his first year. He's 30, and he's disappeared for a good chunk of the season. I'm going to have him on an ad, and he's going to be on the bench on the IL.
Well, I use a good barometer for this. My parents and who they would know if they saw someone on a television.
Yeah.
And they watch Braves games every day. And they know the Braves lineup backwards and forwards. I don't think they would know who Aaron Judge was if they watched him play the Braves. And that's because there's just no, going back to what you said, Paul, there's just no national. It's very regional with them. And a lot of people are very local.
How has he not hosted Saturday Night Live?
Who was the last Major League Baseball player to host SNL, I wonder? I'm going to look that up now. Jeter? Jeter hosted.
Probably was Jeter. But, there are plenty of examples of how we've gone down a different path
I don't know
with
if
their
he's
approach.
got the personality.
And I'm fascinated by, what they do to get it back on track, if they even want it. But it's distinctly different, this era and this type of player. Coming up, we get into Withrow's Guide to Theme Park Happiness. If you're about to head on a vacation this month before school starts back, you will want to hear his recommendations for you and do's and don'ts let's just start with park at the theme park.
It's important info.
This is next on OutKick 360.
Very important.
I know a lot of dads, moms out there listening. Maybe you've already been on the vacation, going into the final stretch before school starts next month. OutKick 360 rolls on. Several, I'm sure, are listening right now that are thinking, you know what, we're about to begin that. Maybe it's this week. Maybe it's the next coming weeks prior to school starting back. But Chad Withrow is here for you with some do's and don'ts for what you must do and what you must stay away from at the theme park near you.
Number one, this is a very important rule. Set your expectations very low when you go into something like this. And here's what I mean by that. It's not that you're not going to have fun and you're not going to be appreciative of the time spent with your family at a theme park at the end of it. It's what I always tell my daughter and I told myself as a little kid. If you go to the doctor's office and you know you're going to get a shot and you're the least bit afraid of needles, if you convince yourself in the way to the doctor's office that this is going to be the worst pain of my life, and you psych yourself up to believe that, and then you close your eyes and it happens, your response is always, oh, that was it? It's over? Great. Perfect. No problem. This is the same approach you must take psychologically when you're taking the entire family on a trip to the theme park. Something that was big for our trip to Dollywood is always say yes to the parking upgrade. I think it was a $20, $25 or $30 difference in parking.
Which in the moment sounds massive.
Sounds a lot. And I looked at the guy and I said, because you're in a line going through, and I said, quickly, what is the parking upgrade? What's premium parking entail? And he kind of looked at me and said, you're going to want to do it today. He said, the park hadn't opened yet. And he's like, judging by this crowd, you're not going to regret it. You get to park in an area right next to us. Do it.
Which means you don't have to ride a trolley.
And the guy was like, you made the right decision. You made the right decision. You're not in a trolley or the tram to go up to the entrance. Yeah. We parked, I'm not kidding you, 50 feet from the entrance and walked right up. And we got to park in a way that we were right there on the exit. So we left easily when it was time to leave the park. I'm not going to go through all 10. You can go read it at OutKick.com.
Avoid the fights. I enjoyed that one.
I would say, have a plan of attack. That's one area where I failed. We didn't print off the map in advance. We didn't plan different parts of the park to go to and kind of work our way back to the entrance and maybe start at the end and then work our way to the entrance. Didn't really plan. Took Evie on one of the biggest wooden roller coasters in the world to start and the fastest, so I knew the threshold of pain and acceptance right away, which was good. Got that out of the way.
What was the gauge on that?
She screamed and cried the whole way, but the moment it was over, she said, can we do it again? We did not do it again, but we went to something easier after that. And Hutton, you're right. Resist the urge to file for divorce in the middle of your trip to the theme park. Not even filing for divorce, but making everyone around you think that you're filing for divorce. I saw 4 separate incidents where, I thought park authorities were going to have to be called because a mom and a dad were at each other's throat over their kids being ungrateful little brats, asking for something, and they are arguing over the smallest thing because it is sweltering hot, you're a little bit dehydrated, your kids are on your nerves, and the inclination is to lash out at your partner that you're with, your spouse, your significant other. Just walk away. My advice was the moment you feel, and honestly, we had a good day. I never felt this urge. But if you feel the urge, my advice is to ask everyone if they'd like something to drink and go and get a drink.
Yeah,
somewhere
don't dehydrate.
To stand, and then come back, and by the time you get back, you've probably already forgotten about whatever you were arguing about or thinking about arguing about. The worst altercation that I saw was a grandmother, I kid you not, excommunicating herself from her entire family because they would not get a map. She wanted to get the map to start the day. They didn't get it. And she was telling everyone in the family how they completely embarrassed her. And she was ashamed of all of them. And they just sat there and took it.
That is quite helpful. I'm not going anywhere near an amusement park, for the record.
Simon doesn't want to go to one?
I'm sure he'd love to go to one, but there's nothing in range. I'm not driving hours to go to an amusement park.
Oh, we're going to be going.
Dollywood is 3 hours away.
Yeah, we're going to Dollywood.
As I said, I'm not going
week.
hours.
I'm looking forward to this.
You'll like it.
With
You'll
the
like
coasters and stuff.
It's
the
a
water
really-
park as well. Did you hit the water park?
No, we want to go back and hit Dollywood Splash Country.
That's it.
Is the water park. There's like 3 or 4 water parks in Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg on the way up too. But that's probably the best one. I want to get back to that with the kids. I love a good water park. Hutton, you'll like it. It's also it's way bigger than I expected. Like, I've been to Kings Island.
You've said
I've
that
been
before.
to some really big theme parks before. I've not been to Disney. I correct myself. I went to Disney World. I was like 7 or 8 years old. Don't really remember much about it. But this one's gigantic. It's huge.
It's big.
The berries.
way bigger than you expected.
Maybe think about the berries.
Yeah, the berries.
They're huge.
They're huge.
First thing you should know about the berries, they're huge.
So, well, I'm looking forward to this as well. And it's
It'd be great if there just weren't
as far as
a
the-
lot of other people there.
as far as you go on the weekend?
Yes.
All right, we'll compare notes because I'm going in the middle of the week.
That's the way to go. We went on a Saturday. The one just awful line we were in was for a ride that, quite frankly, is not worth it. It's like the Dollywood equivalent of the Grizzly River Rampage from Opryland days, which is just every park has that, where the entire family gets in
It's like
one
a
of those
big
little
tube,
yeah,
but
big
with
inner tube
seats.
thing. It's circular, and
Yeah.
you're going to get wet and hit water. And Lucy we dropped. It was me and Lucy on one side, and we dropped right back into the
big
wave
splash.
start, and she didn't know she was going to get wet, and she was in tears.
Good
The
parental
entire
warning
time
by
right after
you.
that. Well, I looked over like this is gonna be bad because I'm like, all right, here we go, Lucy. We're gonna get a splash, and
Well, you're
she's
thinking too,
soaked.
like we've got like a 1 in 4 chance of being the back end of the
Right.
tube, right? So you're like, oh, we'll roll the dice, and sure enough, you always sit in the seat that's going to be the one that gets the
That's
wettest.
a great ride, though. It's always a great ride.
yeah, the wait was not good.
Yeah, the
on that
long
one.
wait.
That's one where it really fools you. You think like, oh, here it is, and there's the area, and then you get back there, and there's like 15 different cycles you have to go through in the line. You don't see when you get in the line. You go up a bridge, down, and then it's another 30 minutes when you get to the base of it. That was a problem.
What they should do is they should build that ride, and then they should build that ride again right next to it. See?
Yeah.
And then you'd wait half as long.
Coming up tomorrow, Michael McCann will join us, legal expert. We'll discuss all things Deshaun Watson and the offseason that has been about litigation across the National Football League. We'll dive into that. Plus, Dan Dockich will join us for OutKick Headlines. We hope you'll join us starting at 2 o'clock Central, 3 o'clock Eastern across the OutKick Network.
Don't block the box, but lock the locks.